He served as an expert for a legal case where a surgeon's decision to flash sterilize a component, an implant component, resulted in the end of a major league soccer player's career and
Wow.
ended up in a $20 million lawsuit.
What advice would you give to sterile processing professionals who want to communicate their value more effectively?
Just so important and vital to patient care and safety.
What will it take to truly elevate the SPD profession in the eyes of healthcare leaders and even patients?
Wow, that's the $1 million question, right?
To the Sterilization Station, the podcast where we explore the people, processes, and perspectives that keep healthcare safe and efficient. Today's episode, we're titling it Through the Writer's Lens, Elevating SPD with Karen Nadeau, is all about the power of storytelling in sterile processing. Karen Nadeau is a healthcare communication strategist, journalist, and founder of KLN Communications Incorporated. With more than 2 decades of experience spanning nonprofit agency and consulting roles, she's built a career helping organizations across the healthcare spectrum, from medical device manufacturers to industry associations, helping them tell their story with clarity and impact. Her passion for medical technology has fueled both her client work and her freelance journalism. Since 2013, she has contributed feature articles to Healthcare Purchasing News, covering sterile processing, and since 2000 also written for Medical Laboratory Observer. In this conversation, we'll explore Kara's career journey, her unique perspective on SPD, and how storytelling can help elevate the profession in the eyes of healthcare leaders and even patients. And so we're really glad to have Kara here today. Welcome to the Sterilization Station.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me. I kind of laugh because I'm used to being the one who does the interviews, who's asking the questions. So it's different to be on the other side, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, this is great. Very excited to have you able to read a few of your articles. I didn't even know that you were writing in the magazine. So I literally brought it to the department and was like, we're in a magazine. So they were all excited. Now we're always anticipating getting that so that we can read the articles related to sterile processing, which you do a very, very good job at. So that's great.
Thanks. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad that you enjoy them.
Yeah, it's been great. So if you could take a second, if you could share a little bit about your background and how you got started in healthcare writing.
Sure. So it's pretty far back. So I started out my career working for. Originally, I did nonprofit work, and then I ended up in the agency world. And I was working for a Boston area advertising agency. I'd come on board, and they said, "Okay, we want to hire you for our public relations department. Do you want to work in consumer, or do you want to work in medical device?" And I had no experience with medical devices at that point, but it sounded really interesting. Something different. So I said, "Sure, I'm gonna go with that path." And that was. Wow, I want to say it's 25 years ago, which dates me here. But looking back, it really was the right path for me. I do have such a passion for it.
That's amazing. I think it's so cool that you're like an author and then you're actually involved in sterile processing and creating these great writings for us to read. And it's been excellent. So what drew you into the world of sterile processing?
I guess it was years in 2026. Chris Russell, who was the former publisher of Healthcare Purchasing News, she had reached out to me and asked if I wanted to write for them and write specifically on sterile processing. And I was so honored to be asked to be part of the Healthcare Purchasing News team. I'd read the magazine for years, working in the healthcare industry as a public relations consultant. And, I had no idea what sterile processing was, no idea. I mean, I worked in medical device and I understood manufacturing of devices and sales and that sort of thing, but just had no idea what went on behind the scenes when devices and instruments were used. The whole process behind that.
Wow. So you probably bit off a lot to chew when you first heard about sterile processing because it's something that if you know about it, you know about it. And if you don't know about it, you just don't know about it. So it's
Yeah.
pretty interesting. Wow. That's
Yeah.
really cool though.
It's a steep learning curve. I still am trying to just everything sterile processing professionals do. It blows me away. So I'm still learning every day, and it's an amazing process and profession. But I'll let you go ahead with your questions.
Yeah. And when you think about a lot of times I always tell it's because I mentor students and I'll tell the students when you go to get your cup of coffee, you never know that the person before you in line or behind you in line could be a family member of someone whose life you save by doing the instrument properly.
Yeah.
you just never really know. You think like, oh, they just put it in a dishwasher, right?
Yeah.
Which is like almost like saying a curse word to sterile processing technicians, just like the word
Imagine.
dishwasher, right? But so it's interesting. Like everything we do, it just has a great impact on people's lives. So it's pretty
Yeah,
amazing.
it is.
Was there a moment you realized SPD was a subject worth returning to again and again?
I guess, once I started to learn about the profession and once I started to interview people who were in sterile processing and learning exactly what it was and what it entailed and the complexities of it and the importance to patient care and safety, I mean, that just, that ignited a passion in me to want to be able to share, the stories of sterile processing professionals and what they do and, their important role in healthcare.
Yeah, that's really good. That's great. So thinking about I guess the context of these next questions will be the writer's perspective on SPD. So from your outsider's perspective, what trends or patterns have you observed in the sterile processing field?
So I would say over the years I've been writing about sterile processing, I've seen a trend of sterile processing professionals really striving to gain more recognition and respect for the profession. Some would say that I've heard it said before, like, oh, well, sterile processing professionals, you should do what you do for patient safety and patient care. And, it's even if you're not making the salary that is aligned with that. And I always think that is just so ridiculous. It's like, here you are, you're a technician. Maybe it's a case where you're making minimum wage and you have all this tremendous responsibility. And I keep saying the word complexities. And, I'm coming from the outside looking in, and I can't even imagine what it's like day to day to do that. But, yeah, definitely over the past decade, I've seen more in the sterile processing community, really emphasizing that it is a profession. It's not a job. Like you said, it's not sticking something in a dishwasher. It's a complex, critical profession.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've worked at facilities where there's people that are just kind of trained to push buttons and maybe do the process. And then
Yeah.
you meet someone who's like very passionate and it blows you away like, wow, this person has devoted their career to mastering this craft. And that's kind of when sterile processing to me really changed is when
Mhm.
I like started to see like there were people who eat, right, sleep, and like bleed SPD, right? You're like, wow, this
Yep.
person is like an instructor, but they were a technician that was very passionate about what they did?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And then why do you think there's such a disconnect between the level of expertise the professionals have and the respect or recognition that they receive?
It seems like the disconnect is really deep rooted. Again, the idea that sterile processing is a job that can be performed by anyone, that someone can walk off the street and reprocess an instrument is just so far off track. And I keep going back to look at the intricacies of today's devices and instrumentation and, the manufacturer IFUs, the topic everyone loves to hate because it's just, there's so much complexity there. And
Oh yeah.
covering that keeps rearing its ugly head, but just dealing with that and then changing industry guidance. And as someone from the outside trying to keep up on all this, I can't imagine what it's like being someone in the profession trying to keep up on all of this and, manage that in their daily lives and their work lives.
Wow, yeah, that's so true. Have there been any like SPD related stories or interviews you've written that really stuck with you? Was there like one story or an interview that it just impacted you more than others?
Yeah. So, we had started talking a while back about this podcast, and I was thinking about that. Like, what's the story? There's been so many stories over the years that have stuck out. But actually, within the past few weeks, I heard a story that just blew me away. And it's going to be in the November issue of Healthcare Purchasing News. I decided to wrap up the year with an article on, where does SBD need to be at the table within a healthcare organization and
Right, right.
broader alignment with an organization's workings and mission. And I was speaking with Sean Flynn, and I won't
Mm.
give away everything because it's going to be in the article, but
Right, that's great.
he served as an expert for a legal case where a surgeon's decision to flash sterilize a component, an implant component, resulted in the end of a major league, and I get this right here, major league soccer player's career and
Wow.
ended up in a $20 million lawsuit. It's like, what, looking at something like that, I'm really excited about this article because I have so many great insights from so many different folks in this. But that just like hit home, and I'm hoping that it hits home to, everyone at every different walk of life who reads the article to say, this goes to show like this is why there's sterile processing standards. This is why you rely on sterile processing, leaders' expertise and don't go off script there like that because it could just be a devastating, devastating results from that.
Yeah, that's so cool. I'm a part of this community called You Are a CEO. It's a self-leadership and improvement community that really they focus on like freedom and health, wealth, and business. And in one of their trainings, they talked about the power of story. And they were talking about the origin story, the overcoming story, you're going through the process, and the victory story. And they share like to make sure you incorporate like the feelings and emotions of each phase of the story. So when you started, or maybe like this happened and all the emotions, and that's like bringing you through the journey. So I always
Yeah.
think like storytelling is so powerful. You think about like Marvel or Disney and how
Yeah.
they have mastered the ability to tell stories. So I always love like when I meet people that tell stories because I just envision this article is like, really pull you in, right? So I'm really
I'm
excited.
hoping so. And
That's
I always
great.
say that, like, I just know so much of what I write about it is telling the stories of sterile processing professionals. And even I do some other work with conferences and helping with educational content and that sort of thing. And whenever there's a presenter, it's like, if you could tell a story instead of standing up here and showing slides, like, tell a story of why this is important. That's what resonates so well with people. So, yeah,
It does. It really does. Stories are very powerful.
yeah.
And that leads to another great question. In your opinion, how well is SPD telling its own story, both inside healthcare systems and publicly?
So I would say over the years, I've seen sterile processing professionals tell their story in a more stronger, passionate way. And I don't want to say passionate. It's like there's so much more sort of, you know, out there about the results and the importance and demonstrating that, whether it's through a story or it's through data or it's through an impact, just certainly I feel like the voice of sterile processing as a profession has become stronger and more compelling over the years. I think that's the case. And I love it. Every day I open up LinkedIn and I see so many sterile processing professionals posting. And like, I feel like that was not the case when I started writing about it 13 years ago. And now it's just there's so many folks out there. There's folks like you doing the podcasts. There's folks doing newsletters, just kind of all different things and, writing articles for healthcare purchasing news and other places. And certainly the Healthcare Sterile Processing Association, they're so great there too, just promoting the profession. So I guess I've seen a lot more momentum as the years have gone on.
Yeah, that's really good. I think social media has created a great avenue for people to be able to share their voice, their thoughts, to express themselves. And
So many sterile processing celebrities in my mind when I go on LinkedIn.
yeah,
I met Sharon Green Golden at HSPA one year, and it was like going to meet royalty.
oh yeah, she's
So
well respected, well known.
I've interviewed her on many occasions. I just have such a tremendous respect for her. And I remember going over to her and, I think I ended up giving her a hug. It's like, she's like
Right.
royalty, So there's a lot going on with the profession. I think it's great.
Yeah, I think it's really great. And there are people like that that you meet that you do feel like, I need to hug you. That's the only way I can describe it. A good way of putting it. Hey, what advice would you give to sterile processing professionals who want to communicate their value more effectively?
I mean, I'm going to say for the most part, like keep on doing what you're doing and get out there on LinkedIn, get out there within your organizations if there's an opportunity to have a platform and talk about what you do. Maybe it's in your hospital newsletter. Maybe it's inviting people into your department from other departments. Just, I think the more you get the word out there and people really understand what the profession is and what it entails, I think that's, I think everything that folks have been doing, like I said, in recent years to really get the word out and elevate the profession. If that can just keep going, I think it's definitely going to keep benefiting the profession.
That's really good. So I imagine you've observed that SPD leaders with strong perioperative relationships tend to be more influential. Can you expand on that?
Sure. It's definitely in writing my articles. Excuse me. I feel like earlier on when I would do interviews with sterile processing teams, it's more of in a silo. And I feel like in more recent years, it's getting the voices of others within a healthcare organization as well who are working with sterile processing, who are collaborating, who understand the importance of the profession, whether it's a perioperative leader or an infection control, infection prevention leader. I'm seeing more and more of that collaborative voice coming out and showing that sterile processing is really being seen more as a collaborative part of healthcare delivery.
Yeah, that's really good. And most effective SPD departments have really mastered and learned the ability to like communicate with multidisciplinary teams. And I know we've established, we used to call like a value officer. So someone who would communicate with all the departments and was a point of contact to hear like, any frustrations or misunderstandings or any areas where, we're missing something that can impact patient care. And then they help to create processes and loop in the right people. So I think that communication is so important between all the departments that we service.
Yeah. Because you're not in a silo. What
Yeah,
on in the OR or in a clinical department, I mean, it's impacting what you do and you're impacting what they do. So it just makes sense that there needs to be this level of collaboration. And like I said, I'm certainly hearing more about that.
yeah, and it's like the heart, right? You think about the organ of a heart, how it's
Yeah.
pumping blood to and away to the organs and all the different pieces. And they've always said sterile processing is like the heart of the hospital. So
Yeah.
yeah, we are touched to so many different departments, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And then what role do you think interdepartmental communication plays in elevating sterile processing in an organization?
So yeah, like I said, I feel like that's so critical, and it's something that,
Uh-huh.
like I said, I've been hearing more about. I think it brings more attention to the department, to the profession, to the importance of the profession. I hear so many stories from sterile processing leaders who will say, hey, we ended up, doing a day where we had, executive leaders or, the perioperative team, someone come to SPD and actually see what we do. And it was like a light bulb went off, just like, oh, okay, this is so complex. So I think that sort of interdepartmental communication is critical.
Yeah, very, very critical. Yeah, I think it's where our success lies is in the communication for
Yeah.
sure. And then, do you think that sterile processing has a branding problem? And if so, how might it be addressed?
Wow. I think in some ways, I hate to say it, but I'm going to say yes, because it goes back to that idea of, oh, it's a job. It's a job. We're going to hire someone off the street. They're going to do this. That's a big reason why I like to use the terms profession and professional when I speak about sterile processing, because, it
Yeah,
is a profession. It's one that requires highly educated, highly trained people. And, I think, using that terminology can go a long way.
that's actually very interesting because I just interviewed Sarah Vincent and we had a conversation about data and analytics and sterile processing. And she also mentioned that she likes to refer to her staff as professionals.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought that was really, 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 really good. That's really great. And then, moving into the category of elevating the profession,
Oh,
in your experience, what will it take to truly elevate the SPD profession in the eyes of healthcare leaders and even patients?
wow, that's the $1,000,000 question, right? I'm not gonna claim that I know the answer to that. But, I always say I'm just a writer. I kinda joke back to, the old commercials where I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV. I'm a writer, looking into the profession. I'm not living and breathing it, but, my first again, it goes back to awareness. I think my first thought is to elevate the profession, there needs to be more awareness of the profession inside and outside the hospital. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's really good. I think I think it's something to learn how to share your story. And sometimes, even like say there's a hospital where they had a situation, an outbreak, or maybe there was an infection and it's all over the news.
Mhm.
Like it's good to take the time to tell your story, right?
Yeah,
Someone's telling your story, but I think it's good for us to share our story and what we really are and who we really do, and that's something that only the industry can do, right?
that's
So
right.
I think that's
Exactly.
very good.
Yeah.
And then what kind of stories or messages about SPD are still not being told but should be?
Oh, it definitely, there are a lot of very vocal advocates in sterile processing, see in LinkedIn and elsewhere, but I think there's a lot of others who don't tell their stories, maybe because they think that their voice, well, doing my day-to-day work and, I'm not a sterile processing celebrity like others. I do feel as though everyone's got a story to tell. And I know from my perspective, I wouldn't be able to do what I do as a editor for healthcare purchasing news if I didn't have sterile processing professionals willing to step up and tell their stories. I don't find that a problem with sterile processing. I feel like there's a lot of very vocal advocates. And whenever I'm writing something, I feel like I just get an amazing, tremendous response of sterile processing professionals wanting to provide their insights. If you've been kind of holding back, just know that if you want to be featured in an article, I make it easy for you. If you want to do a Zoom, if you want to talk on the phone, if you want to communicate via email, like however you can get your voice out there, I want to make it easy for you to be able to do that because I think it's important to hear a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah, that's really great. I just want to take like 30 seconds just to say, like, when I first decided to start this podcast, I knew that there were podcasts like Beyond Clean, Time to Talk, SPD 911. There's so many people that have educational podcasts. But I
Yeah.
really was thinking about during the pandemic, the experience I had where there was just a lot of like frustration. There was a lot of toxicity there. I was thinking about a podcast that really focused on empowering, motivating, like encouraging SPD. And that's really like what's at the heart of my podcast is that I want to like talk about subjects that I see technicians struggle through, like maybe a bad leader. How do you survive that? Or culture issues. How do you navigate that? Not leave the department, but how do you mentally shift your focus? Because really it's 90% perspective, right? Or,
Yeah.
and
You
10% reality. And the managers that are really challenging and that are like not really the best, they're not going to last. They're just kind of passing through. So why leave an organization that you're happy at? Just kind of teaching them how to ride that wave. And so that's why I call it an empowerment podcast, because I want to like really empower sterile processing and how to shift the mind, how to shift the focus. So
I
I
love
think
that.
I
That's
just wanted to
great.
share like
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
the
I
station is all about.
think it's do more of that. I think that's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. And then just moving into our final section, which is, personal insights. So you run your own content firm, you have a lot on your plate. How do you stay energized and motivated in your work?
So I have to say, kind of looking back, the one thing I always knew I could do, even growing up, was write. And it was something that I really enjoyed. And, the fact that I've been able to make a profession out of it, like sometimes just blows me away. It's I guess the mission of my business, whether it's writing for Healthcare Purchasing News or their sister publication, Medical Laboratory Observer, or putting together content, developing content for companies and organizations in the healthcare space. I've always said it's about integrity, liability, and efficiency. And I think that's clients that I've been working with for, man, like I said, I've been writing for Healthcare Purchasing News for 13 years. I have some clients I've been working with going on 20 years now. And that makes me feel as though, okay, I gotta be doing something right here. I think one of the things that keeps me going is, like I said earlier, I'm always learning. Whether it's covering sterile processing, for a number of years, it's like I'm still learning every time I talk to someone else, someone new. With my other clients as well, I read a lot in the supply chain space, the healthcare supply chain space, and again, like it's a constant learning curve, and I love that about it.
That's really good. That's great. So if you would say, so what would you say to someone who wants to support the SPD field but doesn't know where to start?
I'm going to say learn about it and talk about it. Over the years,
Yeah.
like random people have been like, "Oh, you're a writer. What do you write about?" And I'll say sterile processing, and they'll say, "What is that?" I was at the bank a couple of weeks ago, and I was
Right, right.
talking to the manager. I had to like get my daughter a new ATM card because she lost hers, and all that
Yeah,
fun
yeah,
big stuff. And the guy's like, "I go in there all the time," and he's like, "What do you write about?" And I told him, and then I did kind of my high level spiel of
yeah,
sterile processing and what it is and why it's important, and he
yeah,
was so shocked. People don't
yeah,
know. I didn't know. It's like my brother, when I started writing about the profession, he had to go for shoulder surgery. And I said, what goes on behind the scenes for that? Like to prepare the instruments used in that. He's like,
yeah,
oh, I just assumed that they just had new ones. Like you just
yeah.
like, and I'm sure I thought the same thing. So I think getting the word out, not only within the healthcare profession, but I think in the general public, I feel like that needs to happen. If it's one person at a time or whatever, like talk about it.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's super good. I think it's so true. And how many of us have been there? And I really want to add this bonus question in here because I know it's something that I've been experiencing a lot lately. I've been meeting a lot of people, and it's almost like they're sitting there and they're a writer and they're in sterile processing, right? And they're reading your articles or they're like posting a little bit. So what's some words of encouragement you can offer to a sterile processing writer who really wants to do what you do? Like, what can they do to facilitate or to
Yeah.
navigate themselves to become a writer like you?
Don't underestimate your story. No, I think that goes back to it. Like I said, certainly for healthcare purchasing news, we have writers like me who write articles, but we have a ton of contributed articles, and those are so valuable as well. And, if you want to get your voice out there, whether it's through an interview, whether you want to write something, do it. Like, reach out to us, reach out to myself and the editorial team and tell us what you're thinking about covering. And, even healthcare purchasing news is a podcast as well. Like there's a lot of different venues that
Good.
sterile processing professionals can use as a platform to get their stories out. So, don't underestimate your story. You have a good story to tell.
This is great. I'm gonna share this episode with a specific person because she helps me do some writing for my newsletter for the sterilization station. But I'm gonna let her know you gotta check this out. So,
Yeah.
and then my final question is there anything you'd like to say directly to SBD, the professionals listening to this episode before we end?
I mean, I would say I just posted on LinkedIn today about Sterile Processing Week, and I'm honored. It's really an honor to be able to tell your stories, and I really appreciate the tremendous support and willingness of sterile processing professionals to speak up about different issues. Like I said, the my next article, I had such an outpouring of input into it about where sterile processing needs to have a seat at the table, and just I guess I'd like to say I'm rooting for you.
Yeah, that's good.
I just feel as though it's such a just so important and vital to patient care and safety. And it's frustrating a lot. It's like I get on my soapbox kind of, and I'm a writer, I'm not living this. And, I want to be able to communicate what sterile processing professionals are living day to day and, even get that out to a broader audience. What's going on in sterile processing in your organization? What are your thoughts on sterile processing when it comes to the clinical and financial health of your organizations? I think any way that, we can raise awareness for sterile processing and the importance of it, I think is,
Yeah, I think that's so excellent. And you think about the podcast that talks about like we fight dirty, and it's such an honor to meet someone like you who's you think like all the sterile processing directors, educators, technicians, subject matter experts that are fighting for sterile processing. There's people that go to legislation that want to pass, certain things to get, whether it's hazardous pay or just everyone to be certified, and then to think about how there's an organization in yourself that's fighting dirty from the opposite side, right? You're able to share things openly in articles, you're able to podcast guests, you're able to have those Zoom meetings and those calls and talk about and just raise awareness about sterile processing. So I think on behalf of the million SBD techs, I say thank you today to you and what you're doing. It doesn't go unnoticed. Honored.
I have such a tremendous respect for the profession. And thanks. I appreciate the fact that you're doing this and you're getting the word out there too.
So before we leave, I just was curious if someone wants to get in touch with you or contact you directly.
On LinkedIn, connect with me, send me a message. I can send you my direct contact information that way. That's probably the
Okay,
best way I can
perfect.
touch. Help.
Perfect. Well,
Yeah.
that was Kara Nadeau, okay? And she was sharing and how elevating sterile processing starts with telling its story and telling it very well. So every instrument, process, and professional in SPD contributes to a larger narrative of patient safety, efficiency, and healthcare excellence. Her insights remind us that when SPD professionals communicate their value effectively, they not only gain recognition, they also strengthen and impact the entire healthcare system. So if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Sterilization Station. Leave us a comment or leave a rating at whatever podcast platform you listen to. Share it with a colleague, and let's keep it sterile and let's stay on fire for SPD. Thank you once again, Kara, for coming on the show.
Well, thank you so much, Bill. Take care.